Prosecutors, on the other hand, said Diddy was not sorry and that his apology was phony and that there was some serious harm done to the victims of this case. Like you said, they wanted a sentence of at least 11 years. Ultimately, we know a sentence has now been shared with the court of 4 years behind bars for sure.
What if the most shocking betrayal in Hollywood was not between lovers, but between a father and his own daughter? And it was all happening while the cameras were focused on glamorous vacations and red carpets instead of sealed rooms and sealed files. In the last few months, we have seen a new layer added to the Diddy-Harvey story, one that insiders claim goes far beyond a messy breakup with Sean Diddy Combs in 2019 and straight into FBI cooperation, alleged trafficking arrangements, and quiet accusations that her own stepfather, Steve Harvey, helped put her in harm's way. According to people familiar with the ongoing federal interest in Diddy's case, after his 2024 conviction on exploitation-related counts, Lori has allegedly been speaking with investigators, not just about the music mogul, but about how her family may have benefited from that relationship. The suggestion that a man who built a daytime empire by preaching about relationships and family values might have traded access to his stepdaughter for promotion and business security is exactly why this story is shaking audiences who once tuned into him for advice.
Her mother is 54 years old. Her mother is 5 years older.
We have to remember who the players are and what they represent in the public eye before we understand how deep this alleged betrayal cuts. Diddy-Harvey, the fashion-forward model, who by 2019 was being photographed at the Met Gala and luxury events, has long been presented as the polished, glamorous face of a blended Hollywood family led by Steve and Marjorie Harvey. Sean Combs, known for decades as Diddy, is not just another celebrity ex. In 2024, he became a convicted offender after a federal jury found him guilty on transportation for purposes of exploitation charges, tied to disturbing private freak-off encounters that multiple women described on the stand between 2009 and 2024. Those convictions came after years of whispers, lawsuits, and leaked accounts about controlling behavior, filmed intimate sessions, heavy substance use, and a network of staff that prosecutors painted as a full enterprise protecting his darker activities. When sources now claim that Lori has been quietly feeding FBI agents details about how she was allegedly pushed into that orbit, the question becomes not whether Diddy was dangerous, but who helped open the door.
In the moment, it just felt like, what? Like, is this fun for him? Is this like a test?
From the outside, the story still looks like a glamorous fling that ran its course back in 2019, when Lori, then in her early 20s, was first linked to the nearly 50-year-old mogul. That summer, paparazzi tracked them from Cabo San Lucas to Italy, from New York City to Miami, catching matching outfits in Manhattan, seaside lunches, and the now infamous images of Lori dining in Italy with Diddy, while her mother, Marjorie, and stepfather, Steve, sat at the same table. At the time, the coverage called their whirlwind travels a fun fling, and quoted sources close to Diddy saying he was still healing after Kim Porter's tragedy and not ready for a committed relationship. Even as social media users asked why a respected family man like Steve was smiling through those optics. Online, fans flooded comment sections in August 2019, openly tagging Steve and demanding to know why he was silent while his 22-year-old stepdaughter appeared to be dating a man nearly 3 decades older, a man whose parties and lifestyle were already the subject of long-standing rumors. Meanwhile, neither Lori nor Diddy ever formally confirmed they were a couple, and that silence only fueled speculation about what was really going on behind those staged-looking public outings. In July 2019, gossip sites reported on an apparent ring Lori wore at a Ciroc event, sparking engagement rumors she quickly brushed off with a blunt, "I'm not engaged," on social media, telling fans to stop believing everything on blogs. Earlier, stories had tied her to Diddy's son Justin Combs, a claim she later rejected, saying people had jumped to conclusions about her and the younger Combs. That pattern matters now because it shows how much of this relationship existed in a gray zone, where nothing was confirmed publicly, even as Lori was flown to events, pictured at festivals, and photographed in coordinated looks with a man who, according to sources, relied on her presence to uplift him through grief after Kim Porter's passing in late 2018. We can see how that carefully managed ambiguity set the stage for a much darker narrative to emerge once law enforcement stepped in.
But I would feel like I failed as a father.
I think
if I'm sitting across from the table with a dude the same age as me that's dating my daughter.
While fans argued in comment sections about whether the age gap was inappropriate, something more uncomfortable was happening in the background. Steve-Harvey's refusal to address the situation, even as his name kept getting dragged into the conversation. In August and September 2019, outlets like Good Housekeeping noted that Steve was catching heat for staying silent, while new photos of Lori and Diddy surfaced, including that Italian lunch, where Lori's arm was around the mogul in front of her mother and stepfather. Commenters wrote things like, "Where is Uncle Steve?" and "Sad that her dad doesn't even care," pointing out that the same man who had written books about dating rules and starred on a family-centered game show was seemingly unbothered about being photographed next to a rumored partner almost his own age. At the very same time, Steve's public focus was firmly on promoting his Sand and Soul Festival in Cancun and showing off a lavish anniversary vacation through Europe, sending a clear message that he was not going to touch the Lori Diddy talk on record. Behind that curated front, insiders now allege there was a much more transactional logic at work, one that connects those 2019 vacations to financial and legal pressure building around Steve for years. In 2017, his ex-wife, Mary Shackelford, filed a headline-grabbing $60 million lawsuit, accusing him of everything from conspiracy against rights to soul destruction, a dramatic term she used to describe the emotional and psychological damage she claimed to have suffered. That lawsuit was ultimately thrown out on jurisdictional grounds, with a Los Angeles judge saying it belonged in Texas. But the language Mary used and the YouTube videos she posted, accusing Steve of falsifying documents and embezzlement, painted a picture of a man willing to bend the truth in private, while maintaining a clean, wise mentor image on camera. Even if the court dismissed her case, the fact that his former spouse publicly demanded that he be arrested and put behind bars for allegedly ruining her life suggests there were unresolved tensions and possible financial strains that could make him vulnerable when a powerful figure like Diddy came calling with opportunities and influence.
He took my wynton. Took my wynton from me. He turned my son against me.
People familiar with Steve's finances point to the timing. By the mid-2010s, he was juggling multiple shows, a talk program, and endorsement deals. But he was also weathering network changes, cancellations, and legal disputes connected to his previous marriages. Industry sources now openly ask whether a man fighting expensive courtroom battles and rebuilding his brand might see value in aligning more closely with a music mogul who could offer access to new audiences and cross-promotion for his projects. The theory, and it is important to stress that it remains a theory pushed by insiders rather than a proven fact, is that the strange closeness between the Harvey and Combs households in 2019 was not just about friendship and grief, but about an understanding that Lori's presence in Diddy's life came with marketing benefits for Steve. When we look back at the way he refused to answer questions while critics tagged him under photos from Malibu dinners and New York outings, that silence starts to look less like ignorance and more like a deliberate strategy to keep any arrangement off the record. By 2023, the public story had shifted again, and Lori was making headlines not for being on Diddy's arm, but for shutting down narratives about her love life on her own terms.
To not be involved with a famous singer, to not come out, here's the price. And that they're just selling to the individuals that are in those, this is what I heard, they're selling those videos. So if you're Tommy X, and Tommy X is a big, big movie star, and he was at some of the Diddy parties, he was in one of those bedrooms with 3 other men, and he's happily married to a woman, and blah. Tommy doesn't want that video to come out.
During a widely circulated E! News appearance that year, she addressed rumors that she had dated both Diddy and his son, rolling her eyes at the idea and saying people had jumped to conclusions about her and the Combs men. Viewers remember the way she smirked and brushed off the speculation, as if she knew more than she was willing to share on camera. And at the time, it played like a young star reclaiming her narrative after years of blogs defining her. Now, insiders close to the federal probe say that same year was when Lori allegedly began cooperating more directly with FBI officials, providing context about how her relationship with Diddy really worked and what role, if any, her stepfather played in arranging access, travel, and appearances during that 2019 period. The most explosive claim being whispered in legal circles is that by 2023, Lori was not just distancing herself from Diddy in public, she was allegedly giving investigators details that tie Steve-Harvey into the wider pattern of controlling, transactional encounters that prosecutors laid out in Diddy's 2024 trial. That trial, which focused heavily on his treatment of ex-girlfriend Cassie Ventura and another woman referred to as Jane, showed jurors a disturbing blueprint. Women recruited into his orbit through business or romance, flown across state and international lines, pressured into marathons of private activities with hired companions, and filmed in ways that could later be used as leverage. Although Lori's name did not appear in the official charging documents, people who followed the case noticed how comfortably her 2019 timeline fit into a man's long-running habit of blurring the lines between care, control, and exploitation. If a stepfather knowingly allowed his daughter to be plugged into that environment while his own brand reaped visibility from the association, we have to ask what that says about the foundation of his carefully crafted family image.
People I don't think realized was he had cameras all over the place, unbeknownst to them. And now he has all that footage, supposedly. This is what I'm told. So it's going to be really interesting to see what happens if, you're a huge iconic, TV star or movie star, and you're in some...
What makes all of this even darker is the way it overlaps with a separate but equally toxic web of influence centered on Jeffrey Epstein and the newly released 20,000 pages of emails that came out in November 2025. Those documents, which lawmakers on the House Oversight Committee published after a bipartisan push for transparency, show Epstein casually discussing high-powered figures, including Donald Trump, with a kind of grammatical chaos and arrogance that reveals how untouchable he felt between 2008 and 2019. In one exchange, he wrote that Trump knew about the girls and referenced House staff testimony about visits to his properties, while in another, he bragged about being the one person who could possibly bring the former president down. Reading through those emails, we can see the pattern of older men in elite circles treating younger women as interchangeable pieces in a private game, confident that money, connections, and non-disclosure agreements would keep everything buried. So when rumors now suggest that Steve Harvey's name has surfaced in quiet conversations about who in entertainment may have crossed paths with Epstein's network, even if only socially, it feeds into a larger fear that the line between daytime mentor and nighttime fixer might be thinner than fans believed.
I don't know this, but it just seems very suspicious when you go through and you look at in the history of different people that can make you go away if listen, I've worried about some of the things that I talk about on my show.
Lawmakers have not publicly pied Steve to any Epstein documentation, and no filing has named him directly. But industry sources say his long-running presence at elite gatherings, his friendships with other powerful men, and his interest in luxury travel have raised eyebrows as more names drip out of those archives. If Lori's alleged cooperation with investigators really includes suggestions that her stepfather was not just passive, but actively benefiting from aligning his family with men later exposed for predatory patterns, the question becomes whether the smiling host viewers grew up watching was ever just a bystander in other people's scandals, or whether he has been standing closer to the center of something far more calculated than anyone wanted to admit. If Lori Harvey was working with the FBI by 2023, she was not just telling them about Diddy. She was telling them about the men who enabled him. And that list, according to people whispering behind the scenes, may include her own stepfather. In the courtroom, Diddy's world was finally forced into the light. Prosecutors laid out years of so-called freak-off sessions, describing how women were flown into luxury hotels, supplied with substances, and pushed into marathon encounters that he sometimes filmed and later used as leverage when anyone tried to walk away. Witnesses spoke about inner circle staff arranging travel, keeping schedules, delivering companions, and helping bury digital evidence when stories started to leak. We have to ask, if Lori was in that orbit in 2019, moving through the same suites and private jets, what did she see? And what, if anything, did she quietly archive for her own protection?
Same kind of extortion that we heard when Cassie took the stand and testified on that airplane ride back from France. Diddy said, "You don't do a freak-off, I'm going to release one of the freak-off videos that you are profiled in and humiliate."
Those court filings painted a chilling pattern. Cameras hidden in corners, explicit recordings stored on hard drives, and a powerful entertainer allegedly using those files as insurance against lawsuits and tell-all interviews. Jurors heard about a private vocabulary for these events, about instructions delivered through assistants, and about women who later described feeling less like guests and more like pieces on a board that someone else was moving. In opening statements, federal lawyers even warned that some of the footage they would play would be hard to watch, because it captured not glamour, but exhaustion and fear. When we factor Lori into this timeline, it becomes impossible not to wonder if she was just another attendee, or if, as some insiders suggest, her presence and visibility gave her more leverage than most. Several music industry veterans now claim that by the time federal agents closed in, investigators were not only collecting tapes and text messages from Diddy's circle, they were also quietly listening to women who had once been presented as it girls on his arm. Some same sources insist that some of those women came prepared, keeping screenshots, travel confirmations, and even voice note memories of what they witnessed behind those blackout curtains. If Lori was one of them, it would mean she did not just walk away from that chapter. She walked into meeting rooms with dates, locations, and names that could tie multiple high-profile men together. Suddenly, her smooth, almost dismissive 2023 comments about rumor and misconception start to feel less like simple PR and more like the surface of a deeper strategy. Because this story is no longer just about one producer's appetite, it is about a system. When newly released 20,000 pages of emails linked to Jeffrey Epstein landed in Washington in late 2025, we saw the same casual language of entitlement show up again. In a 2011 message, Epstein wrote that Donald Trump knew about the girls, referring to the young women who spent hours at his properties. and bragged about knowing things that could supposedly bring the future president down if he ever chose to open his mouth. Committee staff redacted identifying details, but the tone of those messages was clear. This was a man convinced that his connections, his plea deals, and his secrets gave him permanent protection. That arrogance, laid bare on the page, is the same energy we saw around Diddy's world before the raids. The same belief that money and insiders would keep every party night buried. And this is where Steve Harvey's name stops being just a footnote in Lori's biography and becomes part of a much bigger, more uncomfortable map. For years, he moved through the same top-tier social circles that intersected with both Diddy and Epstein's networks. High-end festivals, charity galas, private yachting summers where photos never made it online. He was not only a comedian, he was a businessman with access. The host welcomed into rooms where tech titans, politicians, and entertainment bosses traded favors and introductions. If Lori's alleged statements to investigators really include claims that he knew exactly what kind of world he was walking her into around 2019, then the question shifts from, did he know, to, how much did he benefit from staying quiet while she played her role? Some former staffers from entertainment events have gone on record saying that Steve was often treated as a bridge, a trusted, fatherly figure who could make younger stars feel at ease, while older executives watched from a distance.
She used to hate, see, that's what I'm saying. I'm gonna tell it all. I'm gonna tell it all, y'all. She said, and it was like, she used to check dudes with big lips.
Others, speaking off the record, suggest that certain invitations only came his way after Lori's profile exploded, as if access to her image opened doors for his projects and partnerships. Was her modeling success and brand growth simply the natural result of her looks and hustle? Or was it also the unspoken payoff for cooperating with an unspoken arrangement? And if she began to pull away, did those same doors slam shut, leaving Steve with fewer lifelines, just as legal pressure mounted around men he once smiled beside? Then there is the psychological chess between Lori and Steve, a silent game that is played out in interviews and omissions more than in public arguments. In early 2023, when she sat down with E! News and calmly brushed off the idea that she had dated both a father and a son, she did it with that knowing half smile, calling the whole thing a misconception and saying she had even seen stories about relationships with men she had never met. In the same conversation, she repeated a familiar piece of advice from Steve himself. Just remember that you're the prize, always. On the surface, it sounded like sweet guidance from a protective parent. Looked at through this darker lens, it sounds like a line you repeat to yourself when you know your value in a dangerous room, and when you are preparing to stop playing along. Steve, in contrast, has mastered the art of selective focus. While Lori fielded questions about her love life, he leaned into festival promotions, comedy specials, and carefully orchestrated morning show segments where he praised her grace without ever touching the Diddy rumors directly. Publicly, he applauded how she figured it out and framed her as a young woman getting things right after a few high-profile breakups.
So I just keep going through. But then I'll tell you something too, haters motivate me. Because when they talking about me, that means I'm doing something.
Privately, if the insiders are right, he was tracking federal developments around Diddy and watching for any sign that Lori's cooperation could pull his name into the blast radius. Was he buying time with that public tenderness, hoping to ride out the storm? Or was he simply stunned that the same stepdaughter he once guided through media training might now be sitting across from investigators with his choices under review? Speculation among legal watchers is that Lori's alleged alliance with the FBI has already shifted the balance of power inside the Harvey family. If she handed over digital evidence tying certain trips, dinners, and hotel stays to a larger pattern of exploitative behavior, then for the first time, Steve might no longer be the storyteller in control. The man who made a fortune advising women what standards to hold men to could find himself measured against those same standards by a daughter who decided that loyalty had limits. And while no filing has publicly named him in connection with Diddy's case or Epstein's papers, the fact that his name now drifts through these conversations at all is a sign of how fragile his once untouchable image has become. In the end, everything circles back to one haunting thought. If Lori really did turn toward federal agents in 2023, maybe it was because she finally understood that no one in those powerful circles was coming to rescue her. Maybe the modeling contracts, the front row seats, the brand deals were never the reward, but the price she paid for staying quiet long enough for the right people to cash in. So we are left with a story that feels less like a family drama and more like a quiet civil war inside a dynasty built on advice and appearances. Lori Harvey may have turned on Steve, but the real question is, who turned on her first? And when the FBI reveals what she gave them, what happens when the public sees the full picture too? Did we just watch a glamorous love story unfold online? Or the slow unraveling of a deal that was never meant to be exposed? And are we ready for what comes next if this is only the beginning? Let us know what you think in the comments. Stay sharp, and until next time, take care of yourselves before you trust the smiles on screen.